Welcome to Essays in Sepia, the podcast that explores the stories that don't fit neatly into black or white. I am Saskia Roskam, and today Mel Ellyard joins me to share what sepia looks like in her life. How growing up on a council estate in Leeds with what she calls her white family shaped her, and how the secret of a lifetime would crack open her life and let in the light she always knew was there. So I'd like to start where I start with everybody, and that's the one question: what of your parents' heritage did you inherit on the day that you were born?
Ooh, that's a great question, Saskia. And thank you so much for inviting me here today. An absolute privilege. I'm really excited to be talking to you. Um, yeah, it's quite a story because the answer to it is my white heritage. That's all I had. Yeah, that's all my mum shared. My white family had no idea about my other heritage. Clearly mixed race from being a baby. I came out with all this like mad black curly hair. So there's no real denying it, but I didn't know my heritage at all for a long time.
When when did you learn?
I learned about it. My story was I grew up knowing that I looked completely different to the rest of I call them my white family. I do now anyway. I just looked really different to them, but nobody was talking about it. So I kind of navigated my spaces without this really important piece of information. I first tried looking for my father. I was probably in my mid-20s. I was living in London at the time, and it was a really horrible negative experience. I started with kind of really official bodies, and they basically said, without a marriage certificate, without knowing his name, without any real concrete information, you're not going to find him. Um, and that was hard. That was hard to hear, and I did. I just gave up. Later, and I was probably sort of mid-30s, I decided to try again. I've moved back up north. I had some really close girlfriends, and I decided with their support, I'd try again. And we all went off in really different directions. I knew by this time, my mum had kind of shared he's French, not quite true. Mauritian French. She'd shared his name at that time, so I had Paul Selvon, so at least I had a name, and I knew they'd met at again, this always makes me laugh at Hyroids, which is a mental institution. They weren't inmates, so we're both training as psychiatric nurses at the time. But Hyroids, because I'd tried that route, had closed down over 10 years prior, so all the records had been destroyed. So that wasn't an option. But the girls, we all started at different places. France started. Some people started looking abroad. Some people started looking at the name. A really practical friend just decided to use the postcode. So in the day, you used to be able to put somebody's postcode in and a surname, and it'd tell you lots of information about them. I guess you can't do that anymore because of GDPR, but it spat out a Selvon, a Paul Selvon, that lived in Menston, which it's actually about, I don't know, 10 miles away from where I'd been brought up and lived. And yeah, it basically, I can remember going to work one day and just thinking, "Oh, it's not going to be my dad. It's impossible. He can't have been 10 miles away this whole time. I might as well just ring the number because it'll probably be an old Scottish person or something mad that will tell me it's not my dad." Um, so I rang the number, Saskia, and a man picked up, and I said, "Can I speak to Paul Selvon?" And he said, "Speaking." And I said, can I speak to this Paul Selvon that, that went to Hyroids, that studied at Hyroids? And he said, speaking. And I said, in the 70s? And he said, yes. And I won't swear because we're online, but it suddenly dawned on me that I was probably speaking to my dad, and I was wholly unprepared for that situation. So I had to quickly on my feet, and I basically just said, my mum's organising a reunion. Would you mind if I invited you along? And he was delightful and said, yes, let me give you my mobile number and all my details, and I'd love to attend a reunion. And that was my first encounter of speaking to my father.
And I'm guessing your mum didn't really have the reunions. What was the day like when you actually met him?
Oh God, when I think back, I was super nervous. What I decided to do was write him a letter and put a photograph in, and the letter pretty much just communicated that my mum had never shared it, but she got pregnant. She just left. She left everybody. She didn't tell anybody, including my grandma and granddad, who he was. She left all her friends and everybody she'd been studying with, so nobody knew that she was pregnant. And I just explained that my life was sorted. I had a good career. I was happy and really settled. But if you wanted to meet, that I'd really love to meet him. And I put a picture in there because Mum had said that I did look like him because I didn't look like any of my other family. And I put it in the post box, and that was a terrifying moment. But I got a letter back from him, and we spoke, and we arranged to meet in the Agra Indian restaurant in Shipley, which is kind of halfway between Benson and Pudsey, which is where I live now. And I'll never forget the day he walked into the restaurant and we came face to face for the very first time. It was just really quite overwhelming because it's the first time in my life at age 35 where I saw somebody that looked like me, that had the same features, that had the same color skin, that it was just absolutely incredible. It was quite a mind-blowing moment, but also, again, our personalities were really, really similar. So it just made it a really simple, easy process.
And I have so many questions. Did your mum have a good explanation as to why she kept this from you and from, more people? I would imagine when it happened.
Honestly, Saskia, it's something that I have wrangled with for many, many years. And no, no, in my opinion. My mum's So the other piece to this jigsaw puzzle that I should probably mention is, she then left me with my grandma and granddad. So I was actually brought up by my white grandma and granddad, and my mum was weekend mum. I can't really remember her in my early years. And what she found it really, really difficult to talk about. So as a child, as I say, I had to learn to be really resilient, mask from an early age, and just avoid these questions because I had literally nothing to say to people. If parents would ask where I was from, and it took me a while to realize that they were asking, what is your heritage? Because they'd say, where are you from? And I'd say, Pudsey. And they'd say, yeah, but where are you from? And I'd be like, I'm not fibbing. But where's your hair from? Which is a bizarre question to ask a child anyway. But they were trying to get to that. You're not like the other kids. So why are you different? Where are you from? And I wasn't equipped. to answer any of that. And my grandma and granddad were great, but they weren't equipped to give me any information. So my family navigated this by allowing my mum to just not share information. I guess you can't force somebody to share information, and almost deny that it was a thing. So I felt like quite alone in trying to deal with it because nobody talks about it in the family. So it was hard. And to answer your question, we've talked about it later, but my mum's way of dealing with it was she'd either get very angry or defensive or upset. And I can remember having one conversation and it was very much, well, am I not enough? Which is a great defense, isn't it? Because I'm not going to say, no, mum, you're not enough. So for a lot of years, it just didn't get talked about. Later, when we've talked about it, my mum had things that she wanted to do, and I'm laughing because I do laugh sort of inappropriately sometimes. But that's her reason. To me, no, it's not a good excuse because I think she's since realised the impact on that, and that everybody, if they want to understand their heritage, has a right to that information. But it took us a long time to
And
get
are
there.
you in your white family? Are you the only one of mixed race heritage, or are there others, cousins, or you know?
No, it's like literally so I had cousins around me, but they were like blonde hair and blue eyed. My mum is blonde hair and blue eyed. There was nobody in the family. And Saskia, I lived in at the time. It was it's an estate called the Swinnow Estate in it's in Swinnow. It's sort of Bramley area. But back in the 70s, it was it was a BNP area. It was very, very white. I can remember we had an Indian family that ran as they called it, really inappropriately, the Paki shop. That's how people talked about people of colour. And as I say, when you're a kid growing up, you're not othered. All kids just play together, right? But I can remember those moments where it was pointed out to me that I was different. I didn't look like my family. Anybody in my family. I wasn't reflected anywhere in my cousins, my uncles, my aunties, the children, the partners that they had, and the children that became my cousins. Yeah, I was just very, very different.
And what does it take to go and cross that barrier and say, I want to find out, I want to know? When did you first have that thought? Because you only started the process in your 20s, and then you really, went back deep into it again in your 30s. What does it take
Yeah.
to go there?
I asked when I was, I think I think I really became aware of it probably, I don't know, 5, 6 years old, maybe, when others were pointing it out. And I can remember kind of taking it home and kind of going, what is this? Why are people asking me this? And asking for information from my family. And I was by my grandparents. I was sort of soothed, if you like, but there was nothing that they could tell me. And as I say, my mum was defensive or upset. And as a child, you don't push it. You don't want that for a parent. So I kind of learned to live with it. And as I say, navigate that space. And I think almost, Saskia, become a bit of a chameleon, with whatever situation I was in almost. I just managed it. That's what I felt like I was doing. I can remember there being some really uncomfortable situations where on my grandma's street, there was a children's home. And I can remember the day that Leon and Brett moved in there, two mixed raced black boys, but obviously black, afros, beautiful, rich skins. And we kind of became friends. It was great. But that was the moment that almost the other kids kind of went, yeah, that's you. you fall into that category. And I got quite a lot of bullying and name calling as a result of that. And again, the 70s, there was really inappropriate humor. You had was it Jim Davis doing the chalky voice and things like that. And it was just, I used to get that as a kid. And it was hard. You become resilient, I suppose. I did. I just kind of, I guess, got on with it. I've had future feedback from people where they've kind of said to me, really close friends, you are really difficult to get to know. And I kind of realized that at the time I still didn't know who my dad was. So my defenses or my strategy for dealing with people came across as defensive in some ways. But the reality was I couldn't tell people because I just didn't know. So yeah, it was tricky.
How do you now slot in the other side of you, like getting the knowledge at 35? How do you then embed that into your being?
Do you know what? My father was just a lovely, lovely man, and he could have made it any easier for me. From the minute he saw me in the restaurant, well, before that, when he responded to the letter, he was just warm and welcoming and immediately accepting and really, really excited. He was like, I want to take you to meet all of the Selvons. That's my Mauritian side of the family. I discovered I had, 2 half brothers that he was really excited about me meeting. And he just made it so easy. And we went on this road trip because the Selvons, my dad's family, grand-mère, grand-père, left Mauritius around the time of the coup. They all settled in France predominantly, but my dad and his brothers and sisters went off to study in different places, and a lot of them came to the UK, went to university, met their partners, never left. But I got to go on this incredible journey of going to Lille and meeting my aunties, meeting grand-mère who lived in Lille at the time. I can remember he was so excited about my meeting my Uncle Clem and Auntie Anne because they had Martin, Caroline, and Natalie. But what he was most excited about was me meeting Caroline and Natalie because same hair, same features. He was just so excited. And the whole family was just immediately welcoming of me. Meeting grand-mère was really, really special because I was the eldest of her grandchildren. So again, it was just, there were just such precious moments. And I got to ask questions. I got to meet everybody from grand-mère downwards and find out where I was from. I've been to Mauritius. I went to Mauritius with my family, and we got to explore and see places and understand the culture and the food, and there's all sorts of cousins and extended family out there. So there was just this open invitation to meet and connect and engage with a family that I just never know.
So it's French speaking, because I hear you refer to your paternal grandmother as grand-mère. So how does language then come into connecting with that part of yourself?
That's one of the things I found really, really difficult because actually I loved French at school and I was really, really good at it, but I dropped it and I didn't practice it and I didn't have anybody to practice it with. And grand-mère understood English very, very well, but she didn't speak it very, very well. So I went back and I'm doing French, but I just feel that I would have had a very different experience. My brothers, when they were little, used to go out to France and spend like months in the summer with grandma and with their aunties, and they were bilingual. You know, the boys are really not kept up with it, but you know, my cousins have, and it makes a massive difference. So I'll kind of persevere with it, but it's hard work when you're older, right? And in Mauritius, it's just a genuine melting pot of all kinds of cultures. But it was lovely going back. I went back a couple of years ago with my Uncle Clem and Auntie Anne. There was just like the three of us, and Uncle Clem was in his element because I wanted to go to all the places. I wanted to see all his kids have done all that, so they don't want to do that anymore. But I wanted all of that experience. And because he speaks Mauritian Creole, because that's what we are, it was just a beautiful experience because people change, right? When you connected to the culture in that way. So I loved that last trip. I loved the fact that I went with my uncle and auntie, and I saw the places where my dad grew up and heard all the stories, but really got to connect with the culture, the dance, the food, the language.
Amazing. And how have your white family and perhaps your maternal grandparents who ultimately raised you, how have they received, this knowledge?
I was just ask you that they're a funny bunch. you know, I mean, I laugh, but even my personality growing up with them was really, really different. I was like the mediator in all this stuff that would go off in my family. That's genuinely how it felt. So my personality and characteristics and everything are far more like my dad and that side of the family. How did they receive it? Well, my mum was interested, but I'm trying to. My dad was a very, very calm person. And I can remember probably one of the only times I saw him angry and swear, which was after a couple of times of meeting him, because it was for both of us, it could have been really different. We could have spent time together when I was younger. I could have got to know him and my family, and that was denied. So it was it was an angry moment for him. And then he kind of let go of it and he was okay with it. But he made it very clear he was building a relationship with me and not my mum. And, you know, that was fine. That was what I needed. They met. And my mum was mostly respectful of the boundaries that I asked of her. And when I got married in Mauritius. So the families kind of came together. My grandma was a very different personality to my mum. So we talked a lot more, and she was interested. My granddad had passed by then. But my grandma was interested and pleased for me. But it's really fascinating when I kind of look back now, because I have probably a stronger connection and relationship with the Selvons than I do with the Ibitsons, with my white family. And naturally, as I say, I think I'm more similar to them. So it was lovely late in life to find them, but yeah, precious to find them.
Mm, gosh, it sounds it. I mean, there's something about recognizing your face, right? And seeing it reflected to you. Um, you and I met at this Black History Month event. And when did you feel, or maybe you always have, I don't know, ever since you met, the two mixed race boys growing up, but when did you feel confident stepping into that space?
Weren't many spaces like that where I was growing up. I can remember being at Park Spring Primary School, and I can't remember the names of a lot of the children, but I remember clearly the day that Mamisha turned up, because she was like this amazing, like Indian little girl that was in my class. She wasn't there, sadly, for that long. There was like an immediate connection. So there was an immediate affinity. Leon and Brett turning up. So from quite a young age, they just weren't that where I was living. It was just predominantly a white community, and there wasn't any reason for my grandparents, for my family to go into a black or mixed community really for any reasons. Their networks, their friends didn't extend into these places. So neither did I. So I'm trying to think, middle school, it was a small middle school, and even my high school was small. So I didn't really get full exposure to other communities. And I guess until I went off to university properly. I think one of the things that it did for me was it meant that because I had to navigate without any heritage and background, I have a natural affinity to probably people that feel like that and communities like that, which is reflected in a lot of the work that I now do and support. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And that's always a question on my list as well. How does your heritage and mixed heritage at that come to play at work? Does it at all?
I think, again, when I kind of alluded to being a bit of a chameleon, I felt almost that I had to become that and be able to blend into pretty much every situation. And maybe that worked to my advantage to some degree with my career, because I was the first to go to university. When I left university, my first job was down in London at the Financial Times. And then with Thomson Reuters, so I was in this kind of banking, trading environment, again, where it was pointed out I had a different accent, different hair, all those things came out. And again, I found myself kind of just naturally navigating these situations because I'd had to do my whole life. But I worked in very male and continued to work in very male, white dominated environments. I worked for the British Business Bank. I now work in another big government organisation called Innovate UK. And I see the disparities. And I think now what I'm able to do is appreciate my position of privilege whilst respecting my journey and heritage and who I am. And I am able to reach back and support people, put in place things that I wish I'd have had, mentor, do all those other things that helps people understand that they can create opportunities, they can make opportunities. I remember my grandma kind of saying to me and feeling this was really good advice, and it probably was. And she didn't talk directly about me being mixed race or different, but I can remember saying, you're probably just going to have to work harder than a lot of other people and just be more resilient and get on with it. And I think that's probably what I did and what I took away. But it's not easy for everybody. I mean, it wasn't easy. There's been many challenges along the way. But I guess I had good nuggets of advice, from my grandma.
Knowing what you know now, being where you are now, how important is it to know your heritage?
You know what, Saskia, the reason I wanted to do this with you is because I think it's so important people have these conversations, and if they want to listen, that there's a place where you can go and do that, because I didn't have that. Since I've talked about it, become more open, which was when I learned my heritage, it allowed me to open up and share what I hadn't known. It transformed a lot of conversations with people that were around me. White people, my white family, and my grandma certainly being inquisitive and being able to answer and have conversations like this, connecting with different communities. Some people I fully appreciate aren't interested, don't want to know. I fully respect that, but I think it's equally important to have these conversations. One thing that I'm trying to do now is, because I'm tapped into all kinds of communities, and I always have. I think that's probably a gift in a way, but I really want to get to know the Mauritian community, and is there one in Leeds, and how do I tap into that? For me, it's been really, really important to understand. I think for a lot of years, I kind of convinced myself, because that was the feedback I was getting from my family, that it wasn't important. But that's neglecting that one question that's really important to me. Is it important to me? And it was important to me. And it was a scary journey to go on, because you don't know what you're going to find. But I was lucky enough to be blessed with, a beautiful family that wanted to get to know me, and a really rich heritage that I can explore.
And then that makes me think about food. Is there any Mauritius food where you're like, oh my God, I've missed this my whole life?
Just so much. And again, I need to find the places near me. So if anybody's got any advice or recommendations, please let me know. I love going and spending time with Mauritian family, having local dishes made. And when I was over there, I kind of think, again, for Uncle Clem, it was so lovely, because I will try anything. I will try anything. But Mauritian dishes, it's like a complete assault on your palate, because it's infused through so many different flavors and cultures and everything else. But yeah, as we know, and rum, we went to the rum distillery. Great rums, great food. What more can you say? Great beaches, great people.
And do you feel that you, as a mixed heritage person, to use the analogy of food, are the extremes that wide within you as well?
Yeah, it's. I'm trying to think of a good foodie type analogy, but it's like, my buffet growing up was like this. It was really restricted, and then I got to experience more, and the buffet just kept growing. So yeah, there was extremes. There are extremes, and there's mixed feelings about it, if I'm really honest. There's still moments where I feel angry and I feel regret, but I've got opportunity to kind of explore all of this. But that's probably the best food analogy I think I can come up with. My buffet was really restricted, and now it's far greater.
I spoke with a woman called Sarah on this podcast as well, and she is British Jamaican. She was adopted by a white family and got to meet her birth parents later in life. And she voiced that identifying with her Jamaican side felt difficult because it was so unknown to her. And so in conversation, when she says to people, oh, I'm British Jamaican, she kind of doesn't want people to pry too much about the Jamaican side, because she feels like she doesn't have that breath to give. Is that something that you recognize?
I can completely connect and understand that. I think, and again, I've got my dad and my Selvon family, my Mauritian family, to kind of thank for making it so easy. They're really curious, accepting people. So my experience was easy. There was no forcing it. It was there if I wanted to explore. And I can remember doing an online family tree and inviting everybody to get involved. And God, it grew out of control really quickly, because people wanted to share their pictures. And it was just such a lovely way to see this extended view of the whole family going back, and how it had spread. I can understand, and I can say I had that awkwardness growing up, because I literally had nothing to say to people, and I found that really difficult. And I found it really difficult and painful when close friends were playing back to me the fact that they thought I was closed and difficult to get to know. But then I realized how I was managing it played a part in that. So for me, it was probably the other way around. I've had an opportunity to get more connected. There's a lot to learn. I wish I could spend more time looking into it, but that's down to me. The opportunity's there for me. I should have brought it. My Uncle Clem apparently the Selvons are writers, have written history books, have written novels. The history book's dry, and Uncle Clem did warn me that it's like a volume, but it's there, and he sent it to me, and I've got it to look through and read. So yeah, I'm lucky. I'm lucky in that regard.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you, but that you feel is important to bring into the conversation when we're talking about mixed heritage?
Do you know what? I just think it's really important for parents to understand that if a child does show an interest and wants to know, it's probably a good idea to give some level of transparency and information. I think my mum was worried about, I don't know, losing me, what it was going to mean. All that did was hold it all back. And my relationship changed with her when I met my dad as well. It could have been very different for us all, I think, as a family. But I think, there was one thing that came out, thing that came out because I went on a bit of a journey of exploration, and some of it I did on social media. And I put my story on LinkedIn and thinking, well, that was probably career killing. But actually what it invited back was an awful lot of support from my LinkedIn network and communities. But there was one really surprising thing that came back, which was from a white older man, very, very, very privileged. And I just didn't expect it, but that's my bias, right? And he kind of said, me sharing my story suddenly made him connect with his mixed race grandchild really, really differently. He talked to him differently. I don't know what this brings me to, the power of kind of sharing and talking about things. And it was just such a beautiful little story that was probably one of the most impactful things for me as well, that I'd opened his eyes to a different thing, and he can now have maybe different conversations and relationship with his grandchild, which is lovely. So I kind of think it's just be mindful from my perspective. It was really important to know, and maybe not when I was super young, but when I started asking questions, I wish I'd have got, honest responses.
That is such a beautiful story to reflect back on, how someone of an older generation reads your story and now has a real impact on his relationship with his mixed race grandchild. I think that is amazing, honestly, so important, because I think people don't know what they don't know, right? Especially in
Right.
different generations and older generations. Um,
Yeah.
I know that since I have been more visible in my career, it's been surprising to me how many people have come up to me in networking events, and it's like, "Oh, Sas, can you just tell me a little bit more about what it is like for you to grow up as a mixed heritage person?" And I'm like, this is so weird. Why are we talking about this? But they would have kids who are of mixed heritage, and they want to understand what their inner world might look like, and I appreciate we're all different, and all the mixes are all different, and all of that. I think for parents it is a thing to see yourself not fully in your child, and to know that the path that they navigate is different to yours. So yeah, communication is definitely vital there. There's just one last question, and that's regarding hair, because you said all your family is blonde, straight white hair, and then you come into the mix with curls. How how did you learn to manage your hair?
I'm telling you, my grandma used to brush my hair for the first, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, I don't even know how long years of my life. I walked around with like this mad fro, because she had no idea what to do with it. I just learned, I think, along the way. I wanted straight hair for a long time, and I love my curls now, and they're so easy. But I think I battled with it. I tried every product, and I just found a way of embracing my curls at some point. Um, I must have spent I don't know how much on products over the years. Um, but yeah, I had nobody to ask. It was like, it's lovely now having girlfriends that have and family that have similar hair because I can go in and, try all these things. But, God, the challenge was real growing up. It was.
Mel, thank you so much. I could speak to you more and more and more and more. And depending on how the development of this entire podcast goes, I might just speak to you some more about it. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your story. I have listened with captivating ears. And I know that, like you said before, it'll reach people who will have needed to hear this. And I have definitely learned a lot from it as well. So thank you very much.
Anytime, anytime. Again, thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you so much for doing this. It will have impact on people that you won't even know. So thank you so much for doing this.
That's it for this episode of Essays in Sepia. Thank you to Mel for stepping into that in-between space with me and letting her story live there. If today's conversation moved something in you, please subscribe to the podcast on your preferred platform and pass it on to someone who might recognize themselves in it. Thank you as well to our sponsor, The Biscuitery, the branded and personalized biscuit specialist that helps you show appreciation. Music by Ben Painter. Until next time, take care of the stories you carry.